Hello. So today we have with us Sristhi Vaidya. She's the curator for the Global Shapers Kathmandu Hub for this year. She has previously served as the vice curator, impact officer, and treasurer of the hub. She is also the finance and HR director of the Vaidya Group since 2017, which is a conglomerate engaged in diversified business activities. She's also on the board of Karkhana Samuha and Canopy Nepal, which are focused on the education sector. She also founded the Kathmandu Book Club to promote the reading culture in Nepal. Thank you, Srishti, for joining with us for this climate conversations, and welcome.
Really nice to be here. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Yeah. To start off with, we know that Nepal is a very geographically diverse country, having Sagarmatha in one end, and it also has the Rai region, the plains. So, what are the major climate challenges that Nepal is facing? There are plethora, right? Like glacial melting, changing monsoons patterns, increased frequency of natural disasters. Like, how do you view these challenges impacting the environment and the livelihoods of people in Nepal?
Right. So I think one of the biggest, like you said, there are so many. One of the biggest challenges we face is the erratic monsoons. Historically, monsoons haven't been the most reliable of seasons, but it's getting much more extreme now. And due to these erratic monsoons, we have a lot of issues like landslides, destroying roadways. We have a lot of flooding that's happening. We also have grains and stuff like they're getting destroyed because of the weather not working with the plantation patterns. So this is one of the biggest issues I would say. Of course, the glaciers melting and all of that is definitely an issue, but I would say more of so monsoons and the unpredictable nature of it is a huge concern for all of the three topographies of our country, which would be the Himalayas, the valleys, and the Terai region.
Yep, I think in South Asia we are all facing relatively the same kind of problems when it comes to the monsoons. They are being erratic and they are having widespread destruction, including the human cost, the economic cost as well.
Yep.
Yep. So we also want to hear more about the Climate Reality Project. So shout out to Mohit as well. He was there at the annual curators meeting where you presented about the Climate Reality Project that the Kathmandu Hub was engaged in. Could you share with us about the project?
Sure. So, we actually did the climate reality project training more with Shubhangi and I, and there was one more person, Subiksha. And after we completed that training, there was an opportunity to apply for a grant. And while thinking about doing this grant, this is when the idea of our project Kalpavriksha came about. So, giving you a little bit of a backstory, our hub had started planning on doing a project on climate change in the year 2020. And what we did is we started with designing a very comprehensive curriculum that would make climate change a more engaging topic for kids to learn in school. So it would be a 2 day event where they would learn about climate change, how it's affecting them, where they would like ask questions and just learn from it. But then, of course, as soon as we got done designing this curriculum, we did one trial class and then COVID happened and the lockdowns happened. And so we were like, okay, we can't stop our work. And so we decided why not have a handbook or like a activity book that would accompany the curriculum so that kids don't actually have to go through these sessions. And actually the book is a sort of a lingering way for them to remember what they learned in the sessions, right? So a lot of schools, the issue in Nepal is a lot of schools, they have a lot of amazing sessions that happen in the government schools. But for the kids, it's entertaining for the moment and then they forget because there's so much that they go through each day. So this book is a way to make solidify and make it sort of a permanent thing in their minds. So what the book essentially is that we took the substance of the curriculum and we made it into a book that's very like you've seen it actually. It's like it's got a lot of drawings. There's a mascot which is a snow leopard, and there's just a very basic understanding of climate change and how it's affecting the kids individually in Nepal. So we've tried to make all of the examples based in Nepal. We've talked about Sagarmatha, we talked about Mount Everest, we've talked about, the glacier melts, we've talked about water pollution, all sorts of pollution, about plastic waste. We've talked about all of these things with the hopes that these kids could like relate to it, and so that it doesn't become something that they just learned in school, but more of a reality that they have to face. And in the first leg, we printed about 2,000 copies, and we've distributed 2,000 copies. And now we're in the process of distributing some more.
2,000 copies. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to add on, Kalpavruksha means wish fulfilling tree. To all
Yes.
the listeners who are not familiar with the Nepali or Hindi, that is actually a very cool name. So I also got the Nepalese version of this book while at the annual curators meeting. We will be adding the link at the Global Shapers Kochi Instagram page where you can access the digital copy of this book, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can.
Also, I just wanted to know your perspective because I know that you've been in the US doing your undergrad and your MBA, and you're back at Nepal where you are primarily working. So, what would the difference be, in terms of climate education? How different should you approach it? Because, when you go to the US, where there is more awareness, people are aware of the social cost, people are aware of the economic cost of the various aspects of climate change. Not only the flooding, they are also aware of the fact that there is no planet B. But coming to Asia Pacific, to a country like Nepal, what are the major challenges that you're facing? How did you have to iterate? You also mentioned that it was essentially a program that was planned to be physical, but then you had to iterate it during COVID. So I just wanted your perspective on that as well.
That's a wonderful question. So essentially, with a lot of underdeveloped or developing countries, the focus usually goes with sanitation, with food security, with health, with infrastructure, basic infrastructure. And a lot of the times, a lot of people within our country, maybe in India as well, the focus stays within those realms. They seem as if they're more pressing because they're more visually available to us, right? To see that kids are going hungry, all of that, that's very like physical, like we can see it happening. Whereas climate change, not so much. Like, yeah, the weather's changing a bit, but it's not really affecting us. But these kids need healthcare and education, all that. So that's the perspective, and I'm not in any way uh, refuting that that's really important. Uh, and the way I think a lot of the world looks at climate change is it's just another issue to talk about. Whereas the way we see it is that climate change is an underlying issue amongst all of the issues that we're already facing, and it's just making all of those issues worse. So, food security is an issue. Climate change, like I talked about, monsoons becoming erratic, more pests, that's just going to make things worse. So, I think, sure, even in the US, like climate education is good, but to it shouldn't be considered as just another area of concern that the world should have. It's an underlying issue in all of the issues that we have in the world. And for people to understand this, it's really hard in our community because as the older you grow, I feel like you become more stubborn and stuck in your ideas and beliefs. And so we tried to reach out to people older than us. We tried to reach out people between the age of 20 and 30. There wasn't the people who care, but the wider audience really does not care. For them it's not an issue. So that's why we decided to reach out to kids from grades 6 to 8, because even kids from grades 9 to 12 already kind of don't care, right? So that's the
Okay.
way it's different, I think, compared to the West, where we need to be more angry about climate change because we're not actually causing the consequences much as, like, say, the US or China or other countries, but we're dealing with the repercussions more, right? So there should be that anger, that outrage, and there should be more voice for that. And so I think that's why it's really different in the West.
Those are really interesting perspectives. And also, I think I had earlier asked this question to you, why the book was in physical medium. could it not be, reproduced in digital formats? And the interesting answer that you had about, children taking this book back home and also educating their parents about it. And that is actually very interesting.
Yeah. It's, digital medium is wonderful, but we got to be aware of the fact that these kids, the ones we're trying to reach, for them, maybe digital medium is not even accessible, first of all. And secondly, there's a loss of permanence as soon as you go towards the digital. These books, if you look at it, Achuth, like there's like places where you can write and scribble, right? So if it's digital, again, it's just like the way you're interacting with the book is very different. And I know like printing paper, paper can be considered waste, but here I feel like it's a good use of paper resources. That's why we decided to print it.
Oh,
And like you said,
totally.
they'll take it to their families back home.
That's totally, totally true. I think
Yeah,
it makes an impact as to how they interact
yeah.
with the medium, how they can retain, how they are interested about it.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to give you a kudos for hosting the Shape South Asia on May. So
Oh,
some
yeah.
of my hub members had been there and they said it was a really amazing experience. So I just wanted to delve, upon how was it hosting the Shape South Asia, and also about the climate advocacy paper that we had presented over there about Himalayan climate resiliency, which again is a very important topic that is not talked about much at this point.
Right. So, for us, hosting Shape successfully was so important because a few of the hub members are old enough that they had attended Shape in the past, but the majority of the hub members had never attended a Shape or even knew what it meant. You know, as I do as a volunteer in an organization that really pushes to create impact, it's really hard to maintain that same energy level over years and years and years of doing work, right? It's really hard, especially because we're volunteering. So, Shape is that moment where we come together and we bond over the fact that we're working towards this goal together. And so that's why it was really important for us to host it, and also to make sure it was successful and that people were really happy and enjoyed it. I'm glad your hub members really enjoyed the shape. That was our goal. Um, and then also the theme that we selected, it was climate resiliency for the Greater Himalayan future for all. Uh, we chose this topic because South Asia, one way or the other, every country is connected to the Himalayan range. And as such, if we do any climate change related project within our hubs in South Asia, there should be a sort of one directional approach. It doesn't have to be the same topic, but one directional approach which addresses the issues that South Asia is facing, right? But then we couldn't find any document created by young people where we were like, okay, these are the issues that we think that we should tackle, and these are the issues that we think we can tackle. And that's how the advocacy paper came about. We were like, okay, we'll reach out to college students, we'll reach out to people who are just interested in climate change, we'll reach out to professors, to experts, to government, people in the government, and we'll reach out to all of them and understand from them what are the areas of concern for them regarding climate change in South Asia. And so we did a lot of like meetings and a lot of sessions. We made a document, and then what we did is we reached out to all of the shapers in South Asia, and we were like, listen, like we have this document, but we need your input because you are the expert in your city. You know the issues that your city faces, and if we can have all of your perspectives in one document and find sort of like similarities, so we have this one direction that we know, we can use this advocacy paper to actually cater to projects related to climate change that would have a more of a magnifying impact for our for South Asia, for our region. So that's the hope of the advocacy paper. I know it's a big hope, but I think it's really important, and shapers like no other people are most adept at being able to use something like this and to make good change for the future.
Totally, totally. You
Mhm.
touched upon a lot of points. And I just also wanted to impress upon the listeners that Himalayas are actually a very important part of the climate in South Asia. A lot of our rivers originate from Nepal in the Himalayas. So, from that perspective also, I think it is a very important part of the climate as well as the talks that need to happen around the climate resilience in the Himalayas.
Mhm.
Awesome. So, Srishi, one last final question. In your opinion, what's the one pertinent way in which an ordinary person can contribute to climate action and promote sustainability?
As a South Asian, given that a lot of us live in a more communal society, in homes that are more joint families, or at least you have connections with your families as more so than the West. So in the West, I would say look at yourself individually and see what are the steps you could take, like not using AC, recycling, all the like you could do that at an individual level. But in South Asia, it's really hard to kind of make that decision as an individual because you're living in a community that's not as used to the concept of those, like such as recycling. So, in our opinion, in my opinion, the best way to do something about this is to actually talk about it amongst your elders, amongst your family members, make it part of the conversation, make it part of the norm. I think that's an issue. So I think our voice is what matters. I know there might be a lot of pushback, but even to sow the seed of making this a mainstream issue is something very powerful that we have in our hands. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. You research the topic a bit, and every action that you take, every word that you speak regarding climate change, if your family starts assimilating that into their everyday life, I think that can make a huge impact in our community because uh, young people inspire people, right? Young people inspire grandparents. And if we can use that platform to actually make good change within our homes, within our communities, I think that's gonna lead to a lot of impact in the future.
No, that's a very interesting perspective, and that's a perspective that mostly, people from the West might not be, really familiar with, about the
Mhm.
joint families, about the social construct that's here.
Yeah, yeah,
Totally, and that's very true also, about the magnifying impact when you reach out to a lot of elders, when you reach out to society, as I put, and the conversations that you should have around climate. Thank you so much, Rusty, for joining with us. It was
thank
a
you.
pleasure having you here and talking to you about these amazing projects that you have and about climate.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's such a pleasure to share my thoughts and opinions with you today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Stop it. Hold on a second.